Welcome back to Dr. SuperCoach. In this video, I'll be discussing the upcoming captaincy options coming right up. What's up, it's JB from Dr. SuperCoach, and if this is your first appointment here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any upcoming updates. Now, I do apologise off the rip. I am battling a bit of a cold right now. I'm a little bit under the weather, a bit of the man flu, so I'll try to keep the sniffing and the coughing to a minimum if I can. So let's quickly get through this now. As I said off the top, it's a captain's video for the week. So we're going to jump straight into it. So on the Friday night, we actually have a double header here. So I don't know if everyone's aware of this. It's not the Friday into the Sunday game. And I think a lot of people have been relying on either Chesser or Constable as potential loop options. So hopefully you've got the GWS Ruckman on the bench, and you're fine because St Kilda play Sunday. So Ron Marshall is interchangeable until then as well. So we're going to go straight through. I think Richmond, for starters, do concede big points to good players. A VC of Tom Stewart here, I think, is going to be a decent one. He does love playing at the MCG. He loves playing at GMHBA and at the MCG. So I think that Richmond don't tag. They don't really have a tagging player. I'd love if they would start on some of these players that I don't own, but I think Tom Stewart opens the week with a pretty good vice captaincy there. Now, if you're taking the punt on Noah Anderson, I do like him this week against West Coast, but I think it's a little bit underrated that West Coast aren't conceding the big scores that I think we have expected with that undermanned midfield. So Noah Anderson, I think, is probably locking himself into about a 110 to 125, so that's good. Probably a good, takeable vice captaincy score there. But I don't know if we see the big mammoth scores that we've been expecting. We roll into the Saturday games now. Sydney versus Fremantle doesn't really give us much to look into. If you are going for Callum Mills, I don't think he's a vice captaincy option this week. North Melbourne versus Port Adelaide. Now, I usually do enjoy targeting North Melbourne because they do give up big scores to midfielders usually, especially if LDU's not playing, which he did last week. Well, not very well. But I think Connor Rozee could be a smoky vice captaincy option here in a game that Port, you would expect to win comfortably, Port, in this one, even though it's in Tasmania, Blundstone Arena. The big one, I think, of the round is one of the Melbourne lads. Now, I would say Connor Nash is likely to go to one of the Melbourne boys. Whichever one that is, I'm unsure. Whether he tags Petrarca to the forward line and then sits on Oliver in the midfield, I'm not quite sure. Wherever he does tend to go, I'm not sure it'll have a great impact. I think I'm okay with vice captaining either of those two guys, and I think one of them will go big enough to take a big vice captaincy score. That is if you're saving your vice captaincy until 4:05 on a Saturday, which I think I will be. I think that's probably my favourite option, going with Clayton Oliver. Now, Brisbane versus Essendon. Essendon is another one that I like targeting, and I know Lachie Neale, if I can just... I don't know if you can look this sort of stuff up anymore, but Lachie Neale against Essendon, I don't know if we can even see this as like a specific team that he... average versus opponent is probably a good indicator, 123.8, a high of 198. So I think his last, it must be 4 or 5 scores against Essendon have been absolutely through the roof. Here we go. So, the last 3. Okay, so 157, 198, and then he had the 89 round 17 last year. Wow, I'm surprised he had that 89 at the Gabba. That is quite surprising. I didn't realise that sort of soiled his Essendon record. I wonder what happened in that game, whether he got tagged or not. But I do like Lachie Neale as a VC option again. Unfortunately, though, the best captaincy options are in the next game, which starts 5 minutes after. So I think this game will probably become null unless you're looking for a super POD captaincy option, which Lachie Neale might present that, even though he's been up and down this year. The English versus Bontempelli debate is probably one that will go... I think it'll go to Bon at the moment, but it likely should split down the middle. So Bontempelli, 132 average. His 3-round average is what I want to look for here. Going at 156 in the last 3 rounds. And then we've got Tim English, who is just at 115. So he did have that 90 in there as well. Besides that, English is consistently giving you captaincy scores. Bontempelli, I think, has only had the one score as well. Yeah, just the one non-captaincy score. Do Carlton tag? I guess they could send Hewitt to sort of try to call him. This sort of makes me always lean Tim English when I'm making this decision. I know Bontempelli is in form, but when we're talking captaincy, if it was a vice captain, it'd be very different. We're going to look into potential options here. If it was a vice captain, it'd be very different for me. But captaincy, purely captaincy, I think it's a lot safer to get a captaincy score from English than it would be from Bontempelli, just because of the potential tag. Whereas English can't really, he's a ruckman. He's not really going to get tagged out of the game. So I think I do lean English if we do need to take a captaincy option over the potential of Clayton Oliver there. So the next one, now I did forget to mention this guy last week, Jordan Dawson, now against St Kilda, who, as far as I know, don't tag in the midfield, but have a super tight midfield group, a lot of big bodies in there. I don't think Dawson gets tagged, but I think St Kilda should be hard to score against. And worst case scenario, if he's starting to dominate them, I think Ross is pretty quick to potentially make a change there. So, look, he's in unbelievable form. So I think he's fine as a captaincy option, but he's not my favourite. If you don't have Clayton Oliver, I can understand going Bont into Dawson. I think one of them is likely to go very, very well. If we look around, Stewart, I like Stewart a lot. And then I like either of the Melbourne midfielders, and then I like either of the Bulldogs lads. So if you can only do one of those guys, and it's this Bulldogs game into Dawson, I completely understand that. I think that's a fine captaincy. Nick Dacos has been tagged in back-to-back weeks. I think he's now off as a captaincy option for the next couple. Great VC option if he plays early in the week ever again, but I think as a captaincy option, he's just too risky. Teams just keep tagging him. It keeps working. It keeps sort of holding Collingwood back from being their absolute best, which I think it has for a couple of weeks in a row, and sort of we come out to this low Nick Dacos score, which is kind of frustrating. So I'm not going to recommend him as a captaincy. When the three GWS players play together, I think it's Cogs, Jelly, and who's the other one that I'm missing? Tom Green. I'm pretty sure it's every single week one of them has gone sub-ton. Every single week, all three of them have played together. One of them has gone sub-ton, I believe. So they, in my opinion, are just too risky. One of them's going to explode. Two of them are probably going to... One of them's probably going to go okay. One might explode. One might go terribly wrong. So I wouldn't sort of buy that lotto ticket if it was a 33% chance. I probably would buy a lotto ticket if it was a 33% chance. But I think that's very, very risky. That's going to do it for this week's video. I know there are some players that I didn't really mention, like Gordon, who could do well, who put out a big score this week. A couple of other players that I always seem to either forget or not mention for one reason or another, but forget to sort of explain it in the podcast. I guess there are just a lot of captaincy options, a lot of potential big scorers this year, and I think it's just the captaincy for me is focusing on who is going to be the safest player to lock in a good score. You lock in your good score, and then you let everyone else stumble over the left field options to try and get their sort of big score and end up captaining a Dacos or an English in a bad week or something like that. So I think it's important, integral to this game, to focus on just locking in your two safest guys that you think are guaranteed to go 110 plus. One of them gives you a captaincy score. One of them might fall over for whatever reason. Hopefully that's the first one. I do understand gambling on the VC. I understand gambling on the VC. I do it a lot myself. But realistically, you just want to lock in that 120 plus and let everyone else fall over round by round. Someone captains an 80 or a 70 and it ruins their month sort of thing. So Jay-Z, Sheasel, other two that I didn't mention, I think Port are pretty strong against those types of players, but obviously put out good scores last week. If I did miss anyone else, please feel free to comment below. Let me know. I know my Slack is a keen listener of this one, so make sure you chuck it in the Captain Poll channel when you realise that I've messed up and forgotten someone. And as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this, you'll probably enjoy some of our other content. Links are on the screen for our merch and for our Patreon if you want to subscribe us in that way. Links are on the screen for our videos, merch and Patreon is in the description. And we'll see you on the next Dr. SuperCoach appointment.